Year has passed, which means we get another year full of brand new films, and at least this year we got movies that we could view at the cinema, and we got a bigger and better selection of films to see as well. So after 2020, we've all sort of moved on now. Let's move on. Let's have some fun, and let's have some fun with some of the great movies. Let's let movies be made, and let's not complain too much about them either. So I have my 10 favorite movies of the year listed here and a bunch of honorable mentions, which I'll get to soon. But I'm just going to say thanks for watching my videos. I haven't been making as many this year, but I still be doing reviews and stuff on a site called Letterboxd, where I do written reviews and my list and stuff on there. So if you want to check out my opinions on movies, you can check them out on there. But without further ado, you know what these lists are about, so I'm going to get through to list some of the movies that didn't quite hit the list, but I still loved and recommend watching. And my honorable mentions are the Mitchells vs. the Machines. This probably takes the cake as my favorite animated movie of the year. Really creative, really enjoyed it. King Richard, an amazing sports drama and featured one of the best performances from Will Smith, probably his best. The French Dispatch, if you love Wes Anderson movies and you love his style, this movie is pretty much that personified. I enjoyed it so much. Eternals, to be honest, this was a very underrated and ambitious superhero epic about the importance of humanity, and I love what the MCU did with this movie, even though I had some issues with its pacing. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, I thought was another creative and unique Marvel movie with some of the best action sequences I've seen in a while. Ghostbusters Afterlife was probably the most nostalgic fun I've had all year. I absolutely adored nearly everything about this film, and I just, as a Ghostbusters fan, I thought it was better than I ever could have expected. Cruella, I thought this movie was a really great drama with a great performance, and it was definitely one of the best live action Disney films they've released in a while. Don't Look Up, a really great satirical comedy featuring amazing performances and messages that I think we can all relate to. And my final honorable mention is A Quiet Place Part 2, which I really, really loved. So intense. I actually enjoyed it more than the first movie. 100% a great continuation. And we've gone through all my honorable mentions, so now it's time to crack on with the top 10. Number 10, the Last Duel, directed by Ridley Scott. He directed two movies this year, Last Duel and House of Gucci, but The Last Duel was easily his most impressive film, featuring three magnificent performances from Jodie Comer, Matt Damon, and Adam Driver. But what really struck me about this film so well is that how it told a historical story through three perspectives. So many times we see a history movie told through just one perspective, and this we got to see it through three, and each time things changed and developed upon and we learnt more about the story. I thought this movie was just magnificent. It was epic, it was brutal, it was really difficult to watch, and it's the type of big epic dramas that really encapsulates what the time period was really like in a very bleak way. Number 9, The Matrix Resurrections. This was a very mixed film, I've heard, but I absolutely loved it. I loved its meta, self-aware approach, and I thought it was quite fantastical how it dealt with these characters in this raging romance. But what was most fantastic about this film was how it actually continued the story from the Matrix trilogy, which I'm not a big fan of the last two movies, but I do. The first film was one of my favorite movies of all time, and this one, to be honest, is up there as well because it challenged our story, and even though it wasn't high on action, it was high on the narrative and showcasing those thoughts on reality and choice, things that we all loved about the original film that were thought-provoking. Number 8, The Green Knight. The Green Knight is a weird, metaphorical fantasy tale that has some of the most ambient and beautiful shots I've ever seen. It was a wonderful film and had probably the greatest ending montage I've ever seen. A magnificent feat. It's not a film that I'd like to go back and rewatch, but it's a film that I like to go back and rewatch in my head. Number 7, West Side Story. Spielberg's remake of this wonderful musical. I can't compare to the original because I've never seen it. But what this film did was have luxuriously emotional and exciting musical sequences that were directed with such swiftness and incorporated action and suspense and romance in a really compelling way. I was just lost in this story, lost in the tragedy, and I thought it was magnificent. Number 6, The Suicide Squad. The Suicide Squad is easily the most fun movie I've seen this year, and I love rewatching it as well. It had some very colourful, wacky characters, and James Gunn's head just explodes onto the screen. All of his wacky ideas are presented with so much fun. It feels very flavoursome. It feels very satirical as well. And it's just hilarious. It's an hilarious, gruesome film that is just like everything I want in a superhero movie. The fun and the excitement, and these characters were just so enlivening. Number 5, Last Night in Soho. Last Night in Soho was a wild trip of a horror movie that I adored. It focused on how we look at the past and living in our own time, and used a weird time traveling metaphorical tale to do so. I loved Edgar Wright's editing and style of how he tells his stories. It's really the type of movie that I would want to make. A very deep film, but also a very mysterious and fun film that really takes its time to let you know what's going on. And I love that. It also had some great revelations, and the horror stuff, even though it was quite more conventional, the subtext behind it was where I found it most fascinating. And I was just hypnotized by it, to be honest. Number four, Justice League. When I'm talking about Justice League, I'm of course talking about the 4-hour version we got in 2021, Zack Snyder's epic revitalization. And this is one probably the greatest director's cut of all time, but I will always forever see this as the film, the original intent, and it never loses its story. It never loses its grasp in 4 hours. It keeps you hooked, it keeps you invested, and even though it is very, very, very long, it's not a movie that I can necessarily go back and watch over and over again and have fun with. It uses its 4-hour runtime to develop all these characters, set up more for what's to come, and I really hope we get to see what's to come. If we never do, that's a shame, but I'm at least glad that we actually got this, because it's kind of a miracle that this version of Justice League exists, and it was this fantastic. Number three, No Time to Die. As a huge Bond fan, No Time to Die was very satisfying for me and very emotional, and it was a perfect swan song for Daniel Craig as the character, finishing off his entire arc. And this was the one to actually give full emotional stakes to the character. And even though it took a long time to build itself up, it had fantastic action sequences along the way, personal, emotional stakes that really challenged our perceptions on who the character of James Bond is and what happens when this situation hits him. And I thought it was kind of a beautiful film, to be honest, along as being a great action spectacle, and I rarely had any issues with it beyond the villain. Number two, Dune. Dune was this close to being my number one. It was so close. I thought this movie was going to be number one as soon as I saw it, but it didn't quite take the cake. And even though I've seen this movie twice in IMAX and loved it both times, it's one of those movies that just the visual, the sound, the ambience, the aurora, the just grandiose scale of it all, and the world building just immerses you in. It's one of those movies that you just sit in your seat shaking in just complete awe. I just adored this film, and but the reason why it's not number one is because it's not a full story. This is just the beginning. It was a great beginning, and Denis Villeneuve's direction is just wonderful. It's able to combine exactly the high scale type of blockbuster you want. At the same time, its story is so rich and ambitious that it feels more like a independent film. I think Dune is magnificent and easily one of the best sci-fi movies of all time. Number one, of course, you've seen the mask I always wear, so why wouldn't Spider-Man No Way Home be my number one film of 2021? It's honestly perfect. It's not the best made movie of the year. It's not the most thought-provoking narrative of the year, but what it is the most satisfying and most emotional and the best theater experience I've had, probably ever. As a huge Spider-Man fan, I could sense the room in the cinema when we all clapped and cheered. It was a magnificent experience, but it ended Spider-Man's arc and moved his character forward in a way that basically combined everything we love about the character and the choices he made, and seeing where it leads to was extremely emotional, satisfying, hilarious. Seeing all these villains back, seeing characters back from the original films, tying everything together for the character of Spider-Man was something I've always wanted to see on screen. It gave me things I'd never thought I would ever see on the big screen, and I just loved every minute of it. And honestly, I had no issues with it, but it was the best movie experience I had in 2021. And it's the movie that I will remember being the most excited to see and being the most satisfied by as well. So Spider-Man No Way Home honestly takes the cake for me as my favorite movie of 2021. And it's another MCU movie has made my number one, but I don't know, I loved this one, and not only my favorite movie of the year, but it's my favorite Spider-Man movie and probably my favorite movie of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well. So I absolutely adored this film, and I hope you all were satisfied by it too, and I hope you all had a great time with the movies in 2021, and I hope 2022 is better. I hope the world returns to form and we can live normally again. But yeah, comment down below your lists, your favorite movies of 2021 down below, and of course, as always, thank you for watching, and goodbye.